evening, and welcome to Anne Arundel County Public Schools 2018 Tuesday Summer Series. Under Dr. Arlotto's leadership, in an effort to address and provide information on topics of concern to residents across the county, Anne Arundel County Public Schools has hosted 6 Summer Series sessions, tonight being the final. For programming purposes, our session will end no later than 7 o'clock p.m. Please be advised that this session is being recorded and will be posted on the website for public reference. Note cards have been provided to you so that you may write down your questions pertaining to this evening's topic. Questions will be reviewed and read by our moderator, Dr. McMahon, and read in the order in which they are received. Only questions on the note cards will be acknowledged. 1 question per card, please, and we ask you to fill out the information on the front so that we may follow up if necessary. Personnel and private issues can be discussed with our staff and guests at the conclusion of the meeting. This evening's session topic is school safety and security, and we are delighted that presenting this evening is Mr. Dole Batten, Supervisor for School Security. Joining him this evening is Corporal Eslick from the School Resource Unit, as well as Ms. Shelley Powell. Thank you, Mr. Batten.
Thank you, ma'am. Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for joining us, and everyone who is watching elsewhere, thank you guys for having us, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about school safety and what we do in the Office of School Security. Just to talk a little bit very quickly about my colleagues, Corporal Eslick is the SRO who's currently assigned to Broadneck High School, and we're going to talk a lot tonight about relationships and about knowing each other and about history and about really firm partnerships. Corey Eslick worked for me when I was a lieutenant on the Anne Arundel County Police Department as a brand new officer in Western District. So I have known this officer for about as long as he's been on the department, and I was very privileged to select him as an SRO back when he first started with the SRU, the School Resource Unit. And Shelley Powell. Shelley Powell is a veteran homicide detective with the Anne Arundel County Police Department when I met her. And we had the misfortune, actually, of working together our first time on a homicide case where a young girl was on her way to Old Mill High School and was murdered on her way to school. And Shelley was the lead homicide investigator for that case, and I was assigned to her as a very young detective to help track down the leads in that investigation. So when we say that we have a partnership and a history and a knowledge and a really close bond with each other, this is just indicative of the folks that you see here, not only the quality of the individuals that we have in Anne Arundel County Public Schools as partners and as colleagues, but the type of folks they are and the type of work we do. So with that, tonight, one of the things we want to make sure that everybody has a good appreciation and understanding is what do we do in the Office of School Security, and we'll talk more about these relationships. And what a lot of folks want to know in light of world events and things that are going on are how do we prepare our staff and our students not only to recognize the dangers that may impact their learning environment, but how do we empower them to act immediately and to communicate what they're doing and what they're seeing with other people. So as we go out of here tonight, if we do nothing else, that's the main things that we want to take away, is to understand the empowerment and the decision-making that we are trying to impart to our staff, who in turn will help impart those things to students. Very briefly, at the as the organization of the office goes, I am the supervisor of security, and again, by way of very brief background, I retired from the Anne Arundel County Police Department at the rank of lieutenant 3 years ago. When I joined this organization, I was very honored to do so after serving as the commander of the School Resource Unit for the last 7.5 years of my career. Prior to that, I had held assignments in SWAT, in detectives, patrol, a variety of administrative assignments. And the most really meaningful and I'll be honest with you, the best years of my career were heading the School Resource Unit, having a group of officers assigned to schools, working with students every day. And later on, we're going to have Corporal Eslick tell you a little bit more about exactly what that sounds like. But I transitioned in 2015 to this role and to heading this organization's efforts in school security. I have Shelley Powell, who is a security specialist, whose primary role is drilling, emergency preparedness, helping me train individuals. She was also a Anne Arundel County Police Department trainer at the police academy. So adult education is another one of her fortes. So she assists me directly with training staff. Alan Levy is a school project specialist. He helps with the cameras. He oversees access controls and hardware type of implementation. Ronna Leisner is our business manager. Andrea Rosenblatt is our internal communications operator. When problems occur in schools, they have one number to call in to the central office so that the right people can be mobilized to help start assisting, either guiding schools or with helping resolve whatever problem they have. Jonathan Morales is a student support specialist. He serves specifically our Latino population. His foreign language proficiency allows him to interact with students specifically at the Annapolis cluster and in the Annapolis cluster so that he can help support students who are not English proficient, but he can also support staff to ensure that the needs of the organization and the district as far as gang prevention, interdiction, and eradication are supported so that if we do have the unlikely event of a student trying to recruit or intimidate other students in a foreign language that a teacher doesn't understand, we have Mr. Morales who is available to us to help with these students so that there's not a language barrier that enables bad behavior. Lafayette Harvey is at Old Mill High School as an intake individual to help at the front door. And then we have the front office receptionist, because the front office receptionists here in this building are actually our first line of security. One of the things that we do that's the most critical for our office and for me specifically is training our staff. And in this graphic, I had the privilege of actually going to Columbine High School, walking the halls, meeting Frank DeAngelis, the principal who was there at the time and then later, learning the lessons learned, the very, very hard lessons learned from what happened in 1999 and then going forward. At the time, I was a police lieutenant. I was the commander. But those lessons are going all the way back to this particular graphic. We've been learning in Anne Arundel County that we need to pay attention to other folks' misery and learn from it and to implement the best practices from throughout the nation. And so our professional development never stops, whether it's been in national conferences, state conferences, local conferences. And then my office is specifically tasked with bringing together professionals from a multidisciplinary format. When you think of all the professionals that actually work together between law enforcement, the fire department, medical service, these folks speak different languages, they have different life perspectives, and part of our biggest role in this office is to bridge those gaps and to bring those professionals together so we can understand each other. We oversee the security initiatives and the hardware, but I'll be honest with you, the hardware is only the beginning and is only as good as the people who operate it. So bringing these external professionals together and liaisoning between our internal stakeholders and external professionals is a critical role of the office. But that's not to say that we don't assist with investigations on school properties, and we oversee emergency preparedness drills. We work definitely in close partnership with our state partners, and again, we train, not only receiving but delivering. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shelley Powell for a second to talk about the emergency preparedness drills and to kind of give you an idea. What does that sound like? When we come back to school in the fall, what do we expect when we do drills that involve severe weather, a potential intruder in the building? Who do we train, and what does it look like? Shelley.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. So what we do is we train everyone. In the past, we had learned that it was really only I think this one's on also. It had only been the administrative staff that were trained, principals and, the teachers. However, when Dolan and I got into the office, and actually when I got in there also, we learned that a lot of people were left out. That includes our front office secretaries. Whenever we would do training at schools, they would be left behind because someone had to man the front office. So they were left behind. Our custodial staff was never trained. Our food service workers were never trained. Our bus drivers were never trained, and we just did a comprehensive bus driver training to all of our bus drivers last year, and sort of gave them an empowerment to do things they thought they could do, but really weren't used to having someone say, if this, then this. So, and that will be an ongoing thing that we will continue to do. We're going to get them involved in our emergency drills. Our emergency preparedness drills are partly from trends that have changed over the years and more of lessons learned, unfortunately. But if something good can come out of something bad, then that's what we grasp onto and we move forward from there. And in our drills, even though the state mandates that we do so many drills, we do lockdown drills, which everyone's pretty familiar with. We do evacuation drills, reverse evacuation drills. Always we do weather drills, and we do hazmat drills as well. And then we empower the principals and the administrative staff to do more, go above. And we have several principals that do some spot drills with their team, and they are really, really good at doing lockdowns now, or they're really good at going into the correct positions for tornado or earthquake, whatever it may be. And we do these drills through discussions. Sometimes we might do them as a tabletop. They might be an actual drill that they have to do. And we are always available. And many times I just invite myself to the school when they're doing the drills, and I help them with it. And it's great for me because I can see some things that schools do that are awesome, and I can take what they're doing and I can impart that to the other schools when I go to the other schools, or when they call and say, we're having a problem with this. We think we have it, but we just need a little bit more help. And then I can say, I got the perfect solution for you. Belgrove Elementary is doing it this way, and it works awesome for them. So we're getting out there more, and we're showing things that work, moving away from a lot of the things that we used to do in the past that have unfortunately not worked. And we're empowering our people and our students, you know, to be survivors.
Thank you. One of the terms that you hear the most often that generates typically the most fear and anxiety in a parent's mind, and that is not a scary word, is the term lockdown. I want to take some time tonight in the brief period of time that we have to really emphasize how we use this term. The term lockdown is nothing more than a universally now recognized initiating term that we have a problem inside the building and that we need to stop what we're doing for a second, and I need the people who are not with students, who are our non-instructional staff, our administrators, our custodians, our people who can come and assist the principal or the AP or whoever might be in charge in not only finding the problem, identifying the problem, and then resolving the problem. Now, that resolution may take several forms, but I'll give you a common example. The common example is a dispute between two parents over custody in an elementary school, where one parent believes that it's their weekend and they're going to take the child at dismissal on a Friday. And this situation can escalate very quickly, and it can actually be evident to hundreds of students, other parents. It can be traumatizing to these children psychologically, and it can and does occasionally result in physical violence, not only between the two people involved, but now we have potential other people injured trying to intervene in some way. This problem that would occur inside the building, one of the easiest and fastest ways to isolate this is to announce a lockdown of the building, which now we have trained our teachers, and we're working to train our students to know to go into the nearest classroom, close and lock the door, and just hang on a minute until we give our other folks the opportunity to come and isolate the problem. And if we have to involve law enforcement, or if we have to involve medical service, for example, in a medical event where someone has a heart issue and they collapse in one of our cafeteria, for example, for donuts for dads, and a dad collapses, moving the kids away from this, evacuating them out of the space, having them go to classrooms where they are locked into their classrooms so that they're safe at the time, isolated. Medical practitioners have the ability to come in and resolve whatever problem there is. Law enforcement, if it's a law enforcement issue, has a way that they're not having these distractions. These kind of issues happen every day somewhere in this nation. In fact, with a school system our size, with over 120 educational sites, over 80,000 children, 10,000 employees, it would be unusual if something odd didn't happen in one of our buildings or on one of our campuses during the day. So we have to be prepared to stop what we're doing, and that word lockdown should not ever mean to parents active shooter. It is not synonymous. It might be used in that event, but hearing the word your school is on lockdown does not mean your school is under attack. And if I can't impart that enough, I really hope that we'll take that message away tonight and we'll reinforce this with our children, that you know that now lockdown is simply, in Anne Arundel County, a way that we stop the normal order of business. We put our kids in the safest place possible, and sometimes that might mean having to move them outside of the building because their place that they were in may have been the cafeteria, and we may not be able to hold that in a locked area. We might just have to move them out like it was a fire. And that outside space during lockdown, these are the lessons learned throughout the nation about how you do things, but they are not the same conventional things that you might have heard before. We keep learning, we keep evolving. So again, lockdown is not active shooter. And we use it, quite frankly, more than most people would probably think, but it's for the problems that happen daily. And they're for smaller problems to mitigate smaller problems from becoming larger problems. So then we have other actions that we can do. Evacuate. In the term shelter, shelter is a softer version many times of lockdown, where we're not letting folks in and out of the building, but we may be able to continue the normal order of business in the school. For example, shelter is typically used, and the problem is outside the building. When Medevac needs to land on one of our school properties for an auto accident in the community that has nothing to do with school, we don't want our children outside on playgrounds, or we don't want to dismiss them into an area where they may be negatively impacted if the aircraft has a catastrophic failure, if debris is picked up and thrown. So we may shelter inside and delay our dismissal. And parents may be inconvenienced, and that is terribly regrettable, but at the same time, from a safety standpoint, it's simply the right thing to do to delay sometimes our processes to allow the safest action to happen. And then the one thing that some folks also get a little confused on is independent response. Independent response, in a nutshell, is allowing adults to make reasonable decisions based on their own knowledge, their own training, their own experience, their own life ability. That if you were in the Annapolis Mall and an emergency broke out, to protect your own family, your own loved ones, to potentially evacuate, to secure them in some safe place, to take some action that is not scripted anywhere in a novel or a book, but to take reasonable action to protect yourself and protect the ones around you. And so not every emergency has a script. Everything's dynamic. Everything changes. Everything we do or do not do has an impact on what happens next. So we empower our adults to make responsible decisions based on what they see and what they're experiencing at the time. And to be honest, that's a tough thing for a lot of folks to really wrap their heads around, because people want a procedure. They want a procedure for all kinds of things. Well, there's a general idea, but the situations and the dynamics change. So we don't want our folks to be followers. Our adults, we want to be leaders. We don't want to create a group of individuals waiting for central office to give a direction when we're not there. We can't see specifically what's happening. So we train for the generality, but we really train also to make split decisions based on experience. The training is not only, as Shelley indicated earlier, is a lot of hands-on practical exercises when we can make it so. that sitting in classroom and hearing a lecture is not always beneficial for adult learners. So we use our camera videos and we use our real situations that we've had in schools to actually help us show staff an actual event and give them points where they can consider possible options that they might have under these circumstances from a viewpoint that the folks in the event at the time did not have. And so our training approach and our leadership approach within this is to not just tell them. We want them to give them the opportunity to actually try it. And the stress of trying an event, something you're uncomfortable with in front of your peers without violence and nobody's getting hurt or hit, having to move to your classroom from a place that you might be down the hall and do it in a hurry and try to secure your door under a little bit of stress. These kind of actions, they pay dividends, but they are harder than a simple watch a video lecture. Very briefly, because I want to let Corporal Eslick tell you a little bit about the SRO and how it does business. Our organization has nearly 8,000 security cameras, and I mean it's a robust system. It is an extremely robust system, but security cameras do not prevent crime. They are a forensic tool that we can go back and we can look at what happened and we can bring folks to accountability. But it's a deterrent in some ways, but it's not a prevention, such as and the security fencing around portables and around playgrounds in many places, our door locks and our access controls, our new security vestibule initiatives that we're putting forward to try to retrofit schools that give them a delay, give them a barrier, an extra door that you have to go through before you come into a school. All these types of external or these hardware modifications are not intended to make our schools uninviting or unwelcoming. We want people in our community to feel warm, to feel welcome, and we know that if you are passing a convenience store with bars on the windows and bulletproof glass on the exterior, that you would likely drive past it to go to a place that did not feel that way. We want our schools feeling warm and inviting, so the security layers that many people don't see that are there, we want to make that part of the layer. And some of the things that you do see are the cameras and some of the communicative equipment, the visitor tracking system. The reason why people come in and are asked to scan their identification is because that system exists to check against registered sex offender databases in all 50 states. And we have, on average, one alert per month every school year. Whether it be an outside person who is new to the area who did not realize that this is what we do. Sometimes we have vendors who improperly and in a way that is not acceptable to our organization may have a person that did not declare to them, and they come and we find that this person is prohibited from being on school properties, and law enforcement is summoned. Again, the partnership is the key. We cannot do this by ourselves. We cannot say enough about the Anne Arundel County Police Department, where I'm from, Annapolis City, the Fire Marshal's Office, Fort Meade, our partners in the Maryland State Department of Education. We're all together. We were together in training today. You know, it's ongoing and continual. And the School Resource Unit, as a law enforcement organization, is the single largest investment in county resources of security dedicated to the county school system by the police department. They pay all the salaries, they give all the benefits, all the equipment. That is a true partnership. And I'm going to have Corey Eslick tell you a little bit more about what he does as an SRO.
Thank you, Dawn. As a school resource officer, I think this one's working. As a school resource officer, my main function is I'm a full uniformed police officer. Just like I tell the kids when I talk to them, I am just like the police officer that you see out in the community that's running traffic, that's responding to 911 calls. But the unique part of my job is I'm specifically trained to deal with children. I go through a 40-hour training class that specifically trains me to talk with children, to work with children, to deal with children in crisis moments. But the other thing that I do is I am there to build a relationship with the kids. I'm there to build a relationship with the principals. I'm there to build a relationship with anybody that's in that building. My primary role is police officer, but my favorite role is to be able to work with the kids. I go into classrooms and talk to them about real life experiences. I team up with teachers who are teaching the students what the book says, but then I'm able to come in and teach them what the community looks like, what it looks like when you get outside of the four walls of a school and you start interacting. The other nice thing that I get to do is, unfortunately, out in the community, most people come in contact with a police officer in one of their worst moments. Either they're getting pulled over, or they've had a crime committed against them, or they're a victim, or something like that. Well, I get to interact with parents, I get to interact with students when they're comfortable, when they're not involved in a heightened state of emergency. So I'm able to answer questions for kids and for adults when the situation is over and they don't understand. I'm able to give them a little bit more clarity. I've had many students come into my office and say, hey, I got involved in something in the community and I don't understand why that officer acted this way. I'm able to take the time and kind of let them understand where that officer came from, to understand why that officer did some things that they did. And I'm able to have hard conversations with them and say, you know what? I don't know why that officer did what he did there, you know, but this is how it should have happened. So I'm able to be that. The main important word of what I am is a school resource officer. The officer comes last and is hopefully something I never have to do in a day-to-day operation. I want to be that resource to prevent me from having to do that officer job.
And I hope you hear in the passion that we all have for what we do. That passion is just as evident with our police officers. And Corey is an exemplary model, but he is one of many of his peers that sound just like this every day. Give you another idea of some of the things. He specifically works with the softball team as a volunteer coach. And we have other officers who work with not only extracurricular athletics, but clubs and other sports. So it's not just officer. In fact, the officer piece, one of the important things about him in uniform is that his personality and the personality of law enforcement as a positive influence comes through that uniform. So when people wonder why we don't have them in softer clothes or something different that doesn't look as intimidating as the uniform, he is the good guy, and his personality will come through. And so we're very, very proud of that relationship and everything that they do. Anne Arundel County Police Department in 2008 and 9 were twice named national models of school-based policing. Again, something that in my tenure as their commander, I'm very proud of, and we continue to build and continue to improve. Technology-wise, maybe not. And you guys, as our families, are also our partners. So we know that sometimes there are inconveniences and sometimes there are things that we want you to feel warm and we want you to feel welcome. But we're going to do everything we can to keep your kids safe. And there are things that when you want to participate in certain activities that are going to require a background check for criminal history, depending on what the activity is the depth of the background check. Some are fingerprint, some are just a commercial background check. We have more information available on our website as to these different levels, and I always remain available to you if you have questions on what is needed for an event. And you can check with the school, but you can also certainly contact me for additional information. pardon while we get back up here for a second. One of the other things that's important tonight that we take away is to know that we have a student safety hotline that anytime, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, that anytime anyone they feel threatened, they see something, they want to say something, but they don't want to be the person identified as saying, we have a way to report bullying. We have a way to report threats online. We have a way to report fraud, waste, abuse. Anything that people see that they want to tell us, we want to tell somebody and have it investigated. We tend to have, when these things happen, and Corporal Eslick has been a part of this, we, on holidays, weekends, night times, 2 a.m. in the morning, when that number comes in, it calls me. And the service that answers it, they report this to me, middle of the night. The next phone call is to the police department, and we can have folks on this event literally within a matter of an hour or less in certain cases. And we've prevented things that you'll never read about and averted significant tragedies just by someone having the courage to say something, and then the people who came after investigating and resolving it. My contact information is here. Again, welcome any questions, and I'm going to turn the floor back over to Ms. Jackson.
Thank you all so much. That was a lot of great information and a very timely topic. At this point, we will ask you if you have any questions or perhaps comments or areas of clarification. A reminder, one question per card. And we know we have a limited time this evening, so we will end programming at 7 o'clock. But as I said before, our team as well as our visitors will be available for a few minutes after official programming has ended if you should have follow-up questions or personnel or personal issues to discuss. So I will turn it over to my colleague, Dr. McMahon, who will serve as our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Mr. Batten and team, thank you so much tonight. The first question comes from a stakeholder who asks, we know you do a lot of drills during the year with both school administration and sometimes when the students are in the building. What's the procedure for alerting parents that these drills are going to happen? Or if there isn't one, can parents be alerted?
Absolutely. One of the things, the first thing that we do when we put the drills together, we give instructions to the principal on the nature of the drill and the timeline within that the drill needs to be completed. One of the things that's important to central office, though, is for our principals to have a good relationship with their stakeholder community and to allow the principal in whatever way that they believe the best avenue to be to, and I'm trying to learn educational language. Being a cop is kind of hard, but to pre-teach our kids and our parents what's coming next. So I don't presume to know how the best way that is to be accomplished, but we give them a window of time so that they have an opportunity to either use phone messages, connected messages, letters home, or other ways to communicate what we're trying to accomplish. And if there's ever any question, I encourage people just to call your school and ask, because nothing we're doing is intended to scare, frighten, intimidate, or any of that. We're really trying to prepare our kids and prepare our adults to lead our kids when something happens that is unexpected. And that's part of sometimes the worrisome thing about drilling is if we're always preparing for when it's expected, we're not really preparing for when it's not. So people saying, I didn't know, as unfortunate as anxiety producing as that may be, I hope we kind of turn that language to, we didn't know it was coming either, but we reacted and we are preparing and we're all safe. So the language is just as important after the drill as it is before, to tell our folks we're all safe, everybody did well, and we're learning from our experience.
Thank you. In that same vein, during your talk, you spoke about lockdowns. Sometimes, the stakeholder asks, sometimes we have substitute teachers or part-time teachers in buildings that may not have keys to rooms or really not have the ability to lock down a space in which they are the facilitator. What happens then?
That's a great question, and I'll take it one step further. We have language out in the industry that talks about run, hide, fight, avoid, deny, defend. we need to take it even one step further. We have students and we have adults who are not ambulatory, who are auditory. They have auditory needs, have wayfinding needs. We emphasize special needs preparation. So I don't want to diminish the substitute issue, but at the same time, it's in the same vein that we have to be prepared to help one another. And so it's not just a matter of, with substitute teachers, giving them an overview of what might be expected in a lockdown or another emergency declaration. It's site specific. So when we have these environments where we cannot necessarily secure a room, we may have to leave that room and be prepared to go to another space. Part of that onboarding, part of that the initial conversation that we're moving toward is explaining to substitutes, to teachers, be aware of your environment that you're working in that day or in any day, and know the limitations of your space, and you still have to adapt to it. As we're sitting in this boardroom tonight, there's no way to quickly, in an emergency right now, shut and lock these doors. In an emergency, I think it would be common sense and rational to us to depart this space as quickly as possible in an emergency. That kind of thinking, if I'm in a room and I don't have the keys, or I may have to be prepared to give the directions to do something. And that's what we're doing, is working our way forward into preparing people to think on their feet, evaluate ahead of time, and then decide what to do when they need to.
This next question is really related to that. In many of our sites, from year to year, we may have new learning cottages or portable classrooms, if you will. What happens there where maybe there's no fencing, maybe there's no easy way to secure that kind of a facility? This stakeholder is asking, what direction is given to those educators?
It's really important for us to have the ability for these folks to be able to communicate with the main building, because if the problem is in the main building, actually the learning cottage environment is in a better place, and we don't want them brought back into the main building where the problem is. The main problem may be a temporary respite place for those who might be on a playground or something else to get additional directions. But those in the learning cottages and places where we don't have necessarily fencing around the community, again, just the normal vigilance that anyone has for anything suspicious, strange, or odd, having the doors closed during instruction, having, just the normal awareness, and if they see something, to say something immediately and to communicate it with precise language. And as we go forward, that type of training, what is precise language? It is very different to say, I have someone knocking on my door, than to say, I have someone wearing no shirt, sweating profusely on a winter day, banging on my door, trying to break it in. That is the same event, very different language, and initiates a very different response potentially. So again, people, it's the communication, it's the training, it's the getting people used to a line of thinking and comfortable with being direct and forthcoming, and to not try to convince themselves that they're not seeing what they're seeing. That many of us have a tendency to try to talk ourselves out of a problem, but it really is the problem.
Thank you. This question is about the SROs, Corporal Eslick. What drew you into becoming an SRO, and what criteria were put out there for you to contemplate moving from an officer in the field to becoming a school resource officer?
Okay, so let me start with the criteria. Basically, our position is put out in the police department as a position announcement, and in order to apply for that position, you have to meet certain criteria, be on the department a certain amount of time, be able to work with others, all those different kind of criteria. And then we go through an interview process where they'll interview with the command staff of the unit, some officers on that panel and stuff like that, and then we generate a list of potential candidates, and then that potential candidates are put towards the command staff, and then they select who goes into it. Me personally, what drew me to it is in my outside life, in my private life, I worked with youth in my church and that type of things, so I enjoyed working with youth, and so I saw a perfect opportunity to merge my professional life with my personal life and get into a school and be able to work with youth. I also saw the changing of the way students looked at police officers, And I wanted that opportunity to be able to show them, first we're people, then we're police, and be able to have that dialogue of why we do what we do when we do it.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Batten, do you have a role to play in the selection of school resource officers?
Well, for good or bad, I had this in this one anyway. And, actually, you know, we do. We have a collaborative partnership, and one of the things that most people don't realize is not only is it very difficult to be a police officer these days for the expectations our community has, and as they rightly should, have very high expectations, but our SROs are the most scrutinized officers in the county every day. Everything they do is on camera, overhead, or on a student's cell phone. Every action they take is subject to being recorded at every angle in the world, and they could easily end up on CNN. Even when they are right, the optics can look wrong. And so they have to have an understanding coming in that they are going to be heavily scrutinized, and everything that they do is going to have to be articulated later, not just in court, but to the court of public opinion. And everything that they do has the potential to destroy an entire program that's helpful to students, helpful to the community, just by one act of poor judgment. So as far as that selection process goes, I could not be more proud of the unit and the men and women who have come through the unit through the years. They have just recently been once again awarded a departmental citation for excellence in policing just a few months ago by the chief of police. And it was not their first one. So they are a very distinguished group, and it's a very selective process. You have to keep in mind, we don't want officers who are timid and afraid, but at the same time, we don't necessarily want officers whose first response is to necessarily use force when maybe another option might be warranted. You're going to see these same kids and these same families every day. Just because you arrest them today doesn't mean you won't see them in school tomorrow or the next day. So the mindset that these guys have and these women have is remarkable. It is very unique in policing, and it's why it is a very, very competitive and very rewarding assignment.
So you're speaking to a healthy program overall. This question speaks to if there are citizens out there that want to advocate for additional funding for such a program, what is their mechanism for doing so?
Well, with any funding, your representatives at the local level, state level, and any level that you want to speak to your elected representatives regarding the funding and the priorities. The chief of police for both Annapolis and for Anne Arundel County, again, are remarkable and amazing partners. Selections as far as the number of school resource officers are at their sole discretion. We have input on where we believe they might be the most helpful, but at the same time, the ultimate discretion on where a chief of police assigns his officer is their discretion, and we facilitate that when that decision's made. So again, funding sources, I would recommend local government officials as far as that goes, and any questions about specific deployments for officers are probably best directed to the police departments.
Thank you. This question really talks about how we handle threats and rumors and how we investigate them, especially the ones that may come with respect to online threats and challenges that we have.
The threats come in a variety of sources, and there's a contagion effect that happens when something happens in the nation. We can anticipate we will have copycat, and we will have other residual events or things that people may have dismissed before may come to their attention, and they will again report these acts or these comments. We are very aggressive in the way that we respond and investigate. And when I was saying earlier, it doesn't matter if it's Christmas Eve. And I've had an episode where that happened in my career, where I received a call from my predecessor of a significant threat that had been called to the Student Safety Hotline, and that investigation was initiated immediately, and there was an officer and officers investigating in the living room of that student within an hour on Christmas Eve. It does not matter when, where, whatever we have to do. In one episode, which was really remarkable this past school year, an SRO in Texas had the name, and only the first name, of a student that she believed was involved in a suicide pact with, it was allegedly an Anne Arundel County school student with only the first name known, was involved in a suicide pact with a student in Texas. And the only way she believed it was Anne Arundel County was an Annapolis or something address. It was very minimal information. Through our partnership with the Maryland Center for School Safety, we were able to figure out exactly who that was in under 2 hours and have interdictive services to that student in our county in under 2 hours. The way that happened was the officer was calling every county in Maryland by alphabetical order, got to Anne Arundel pretty quick, and I suggested, tell you what, let's use our partnership to our advantage. And we put the information out, and we had her identified in under 2 hours and services rendered, all the way from Texas. So I don't know where anybody can do any more or any better than that moment. That was very satisfying to me, and it really ties in the exemplary nature of being involved at the state level and having really, really close partnerships with our state, not only public but private school partners, so that we can solve these kind of problems and with that kind of expediency.
Thank you. This stakeholder asks a question about a school shooting that happened in the state of Maryland, but not in Anne Arundel County, over the past 12 months. And the question is, they noticed that the students were sent to a neighboring school and parents were also sent there. What is the reason for that, and how would parents learn where their student is going to be when such a crisis occurs?
That's a great question. That process is called reunification. What happens in any event that is of large scale that size, and I'm going to use Corporal Estick's school, Broadneck High School, as an example. When an event of significant magnitude would happen, that all the law enforcement resources, all the medical resources that would be going there and would be blocking off access routes in and out of the school and all the things that were going on to control the school and to figure out who might need medical aid, do the investigation and all those sorts of things. At some point, we're going to have to move the children out of that school who are not affected or who might need to be interviewed or a lot of other things. But you really can't bring parents into that environment. It's congested, and as difficult as that is. The lessons learned throughout the nation have shown that you cannot reunify parents with students at the school that is affected. We don't want to say specifically where any particular school might go in advance, because the circumstances that lead to that are not known to us at the time. We do, however, have plans and reunification sites that we are continually refining the processes of how we would notify parents through our communications officer, through social media, through the radio stations on where to go, and to do that very early. Now, one of the examples that we had was an elementary school that had to evacuate because of a gas leak, and the gas leak source was not determined. So we have youngsters who are not under threat of gunfire or anything else, but they can't go back in the school, and 2 hours into it, you have the young children have to go to the bathroom. And so at some point we realized we have to pick these children up and we have to go somewhere with them, and we really got an opportunity to practice our reunification procedure that day by bringing these children all the way to Annapolis High School. And we practiced some things and did some things, and we were able to take the ones who parents did not come back, pick them up. When the school was cleared, we were able to take them back to their school and dismiss them as normal. But we were able to practice something and learn something, a lot of somethings, and that's what we know now, that we have a plan. And it's just a matter of refining it as time goes on through practice. Hopefully we don't have to, but we do have a plan. We just won't be able to tell you in advance where we're going to go, because the nature of what we're doing may change the location or circumstance.
Thank you. This is the last question of the evening. You've given us so much information, and it's very emotional when we're talking about the lives of our young people. So if you'd like to leave us with one or two things that, if you're a parent out there, what would you want that parent to know about school security? that maybe you've already said, or maybe it's just you're leaving us a tip or you're leaving us something to think about? One or two?
Well, let's do this. We'll start with Shelley on the end, work our way down to me, and I'll wrap
Perfect.
up. Shelley?
So I would say that we have come leaps and bounds in the last, well, I've been here 2 years, so at least since I've been here, but I have seen a huge amount of positive response from staff and from students once they start going through the drills, from staff and from parents who, you know, call in and say, could you tell us how you do this or how you don't do this? And they're very positive about it. And if I do speak to a parent, what I say to them is there's much more to come, you know, and if you have questions, you can always write to us or you can always call in, and we're more than happy to explain our processes. So I just think, again, we have the partnerships, but I look more of the partnerships that we have with our staff and our parents, and how we're making our schools so much safer for our students.
Thank you, Ms. Powell. Corporal Eslick?
Yeah, I think my final comments would be for parents to realize that your police department is doing the best that they possibly can to secure your children and to keep your children safe. And that every single SRO that's in this unit goes to school every single day and holds that school as their own. And they are there, and those are their children as much as they are your children. And we are doing the best to make them better people and better citizens of Anne Arundel County.
Thank you.
My thing is, our schools are infinitely safer than any place that your children can be on any given day. They are safer any day than the communities that they sit in because of the intense supervision that they are given by adults, the interactions that they have. And we will always have problems with each other, interacting with each other, as long as human beings interact with each other. There will always be bullying. There will always be unpleasantness between human beings. It's not acceptable, but we work at it. But no matter what, you can send your kids to school in Anne Arundel County and know that there are people who are passionate about making sure that they come back to you better than you sent them to us. So with that, I think that's the end game for everybody in the school system, and it certainly is from my office.
Thank you, Mr. Batten. Thank you, Corporal Eslick. Ms. Powell, great job.
So again, thank you all very much. Especially thank you to Mr. Batten, to Corporal Eslick, and Ms. Powell for this very, very informative presentation. Thank you to all of our stakeholders who attended this evening as well. I'm especially grateful for the support of the AACPS Awesome team who have presented over the past few weeks and who have worked behind the scenes to ensure the success of our Tuesday Summer Series in order to better inform our community under the direction of our Superintendent, Dr. Arlotto. I would like to also take this opportunity to thank Dr. McMahon, Mr. Shaknovich, Mr. Mosier, Mr. Gray, Ms. Hauk, Mr. Sonera, Mr. Cole, and Dr. Gillens for all of the work that they have done behind the scenes to ensure the success of our Tuesday Summer Series. And finally, thank you to our Board of Education for their tremendous support of this and many other initiatives. Thank you, have a good evening, and as I stated before, our staff will be available for a few minutes to further clarify or answer any other questions you may have. Thank you.
That is so mean.